your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Intel up by 9%, surging the most in nearly 3 years after predicting a return to sales growth in the fourth quarter. CEO Pat Gelsinger spoke about the quarter and the outlook this morning in an interview on Bloomberg Radio.
Our roadmap is strong, and we executed in the quarter on our next gen, our Gen 4 product that did a bit better than we thought, and a lot of AI use cases in this area of inferencing. The next generation, Gen 5, we're already ramping that in production, and that's going to get announced in December. But next year's products, we're already seeing great health, and we're ahead of schedule in those, and those really improve our competitiveness.
And again, Intel after earnings up by 9%. Amazon after earnings up 6.7%. GM's driverless taxi unit Cruise has grounded its entire fleet days after its license was suspended by California. And with more, here's Bloomberg's Erica Herskowitz.
Charlie, it's a major setback for the company, which has been laying the groundwork to expand to multiple U.S. cities and Japan. Earlier this week, California's Department of Motor Vehicles suspended Cruise from operating driverless cars in the state and accused the company of withholding crucial video of an accident involving a pedestrian in San Francisco. Federal regulators with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration have also opened an investigation into Cruise. Cruise has been expanding to other cities, including Austin and Phoenix. Charlie?
And that's Erica Herskowitz reporting General Motors down now by 4.9%. And those are some of the top company stories that we're following for you at this hour. I'm Charlie Pelletin. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just got about 4.5 minutes left in today's trading session, wrapping up the Friday trade. Of course, the week overall. Carol Messer, Tim Stenevec, live here in our Interactive Brokers studio on YouTube and Originals. We're going to head over to our TV team in just a moment. But how many of you who are watching on Originals and YouTube go like this when you're done with the Zoom call?
I'm such a weirdo. I always wave. What's wrong with me? What is wrong with me?
We all do. Come on, in the control room. Don't you, when you're done with Zoom, don't you wave?
They're never on Zoom because
wave?
they're always in the office. Paul doesn't do Zoom.
He doesn't even smile. That's true. I don't even think his camera's on when we do Zoom. Matthew Boyle, though, writing a really good column on this.
So he tries to answer this question, and by the way, am I a weirdo is in the headline. To some experts in human behavior and communication, the so-called Zoom wave emerged due to our need to recreate the social connections that the pandemic ruptured. For others, Carol, it's just a simple way to signal the meeting is over before digitally departing.
Whatever the reason, it's as much a remote work ritual as wearing sweatpants with a business-friendly top known as the Zoom mullet. He talked with some different workplace strategists. One who says, I'm a big fan of the wave. People like to know when something begins and ends. Those beginnings and endings are what I call prime rituals, real estate, and rituals give us a sense of belonging and connection.
Do we wave because we need to feel a sense of connection, Carol? Is that why we wave?
I just kind of wave because I'm like, am I done? Can I move off to the other thing? The thing I've really got to do?
It's a good sign if you're waving because it means you're actually paying attention. Sometimes I find myself on Zoom calls still, and I'm like, wait, where did everybody go?
I always find what's really awkward is I'm kind of slow to like close it out. And I feel a little awkward
Zoom doesn't
with
make
that.
it easy because they make you close two windows, which I still don't understand.
Exactly.
It's like very hard to end a meeting.
Yeah. A survey this month by Professional Network Fishbowl found that 55% of workers wave, down from 57% who said they did so last year in a survey by Zoom, and the 3 out of 4 who said so in 2021. Maybe there's a decline because, I don't know, maybe we're doing it less? I don't know.
Or maybe we're not on a Zoom as much. Or maybe we feel, since we're coming into the office more, more of a hybrid approach, we're not feeling like we need that connection as much. Because, you're in the office on a Tuesday, if you're not on a Wednesday,
so
you just saw everyone in person.
You're a waiver, right?
Yeah, but I come into the office every day, but I still wave. I don't know.
But you're a waiver, right?
I'm a waiver, yeah.
You're a waiver.
Maybe I feel, I crave the need for human interaction.
It's okay to embrace your waving, folks. Bye.
Waving.
No, we're not going anywhere. Wait, the market's got to close. All right, stick around, everybody. Just a few minutes left in the trading Beyond the Bell with our TV colleagues and Tim and me. Waving or not waving starts right now.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Scarlett Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell. You're here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast with our friends Carol Masser and Tim Stenovic. Welcome to our audiences across our Bloomberg platforms on a down week for the markets.
Yeah.
Once again here, as earnings not necessarily saving us, and I'm not sure the Fed is going to save them either.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, right? The Fed decision next week, that'll be a focal point, along with some really important earnings as well. But it is interesting to see the negative tone, even though we kind of are leveling out here, but we are definitely way off our highs of the session today.
Eric Clark, a portfolio manager over at Rational Dynamic Brands Funds, thinks the consumer is actually going to save us. He thinks people have written off the consumer. And look, he's got a lot of consumer-focused companies, including Nike, Lululemon, Apple, Live Nation inside his Rational Dynamic Brand Funds.
Trade, doesn't he?
He does like the baby boomer trade, but he says, hey, what about that $7 trillion in money market funds? People have that money just sitting there. They could still spend it on goods and services.
Yeah, but it's making so much money for us. It's, you know, we have a 5% yield on that. So why would anyone take that out?
Maybe they want to go see Taylor Swift.
Do you need to buy another pair of Uggs?
Yes. Or go to Europe? Yes.
The answer from Carol is yes. Yes and yes.
YOLO. It's the YOLO trade.
I hope my husband's not listening.
And of course, you look at what happened with Ford and GM and Stellantis over the last hour. We're hearing, of course, that GM and Stellantis is looking to match the 25% pay increase that Ford has offered to the UAW. Perhaps the strike is coming to an end, but then we have to contend with the absorption of higher costs for all three automakers.
Yeah, I mean, sources telling Bloomberg that they're working this deal out today and could announce it on Sunday. But we were just talking here on the television program, guys, about just the share reaction. I mean, they were already down even before the latest news here, but you're talking about, you know, a 4 to 5% loss on GM on the day. And Ford, last time I checked, was actually on pace for its worst day, going back to 2011.
Down 12%.
A Dow Jones Industrial Average not having a great day or a great week, down about 1% on the day, back down to around 32,400. The S&P 500, another close below 4,200, down 20 points or about 0.5% here on the day. And the NASDAQ Composite actually holding on to some of its gains here, up about 0.4% on the day, though we should point out still in the red on the week. And the Russell 2000 not gaining any traction. That is your laggard for the major indices, down 20 points or 1.2%.
Yeah, risk off certainly for the week overall when it comes to the equity trade. Having said that, Scarlett, I'm looking at the S&P 500. You know, this is the day. Most names down, 414 to the downside in the S&P 500. 89, though, actually gaining ground. I'll get into some of those. And you've got none unchanged, but you've got the major industry groups.
And the industry groups really highlight how the Magnificent Seven are the star performers in today's trade. You look at the gainers here, retail, that's Amazon, semiconductor equipment makers, that's Intel, tech hardware and equipment, media and entertainment. Magnificent Seven all represented there. On the downside, there's, I mean, pick your poison. You've got banks off by more than 3%, pharma companies off by about 2.5%, energy stocks lower by 2%, 2.3%. A lot of decliners there, but the big tech names are keeping the S&P 500 from falling more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
please.
just before we move on to some of the individual names, I mean, we kind of be remiss not in pointing out here that the S&P now down 10% from that year-to-date high, which was, of course, back on July 31st. That's the same high that we saw for some of the other indices. That NASDAQ 100, remember, even though it did manage to close higher today, was already down about 11% from that high in July. And, of course, the Russell, which has been in the doldrums now down about 18% from its year-to-date high in mid-July here. So we're talking about some really significant declines here, at least if you pay attention to these kind of round technical levels.
Well, and it speaks to the volatility, like in a short time span, if you will. And if you think about over the last, 6 months, 12 months, the different thinkings, just think about it. It was earlier this year we were worried about the regional bank sector and whether that was going to be much more broadly felt in the U.S. economy. And then we saw a rally and then we saw a sell-off. So it has been quite the back and forth, if you will, in terms
when
of
does that shake sentiment, though? You talk about year-to-date gains on the S&P now that are only at 7%. They were double that, at the end of like June or mid-July or so, I believe. Here you have a Dow Jones Industrial Averages now is in the red on a year-to-date basis. And I was telling Scarlett earlier, over in Europe, they basically erased all of their gains for the year, or at least are on the precipice of doing it.
Yeah, we spoke to Jeff Kleintop earlier this week down at Charles Schwab. Carol alluded to this earlier, but he said, forget the U.S., increase your allocation to Europe. Yeah, to Europe. They're feeling it worse in Europe right now. Stocks are cheaper in Europe, he said, on a valuation basis. That is where the opportunity
Talked
is.
about outperformances, too, in terms of some of those European names. But
Not seeing it yet, though, right?
Not seeing it yet.
He's saying go in while it's feeling bad. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Let's get to the idea, Carol. And I know you need to kind of get to some of the individual gainers, but I am curious that when you go through those gainers, that what sort of moved the market here? I mean, we're not getting that from the big cap tech names. I know, at least on a weekly basis, we certainly didn't get it. I know some of them did perform okay on the day, including Amazon.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because, you know, when Intel was up, about 9.3%, that's one of my gainers. We know we all broke the earnings last night, and it looks like maybe the turnaround, right, is working. We heard from the CEO on Bloomberg TV. And initially in the day, I'm just looking right now, the stocks did finish with about a 1.2% gain, but earlier in the session, not a lot of names were moving to the upside, and it was interesting. I thought, well, it should have, you know, brought the whole market up in terms of the semi-market, if you will, but it looks like it took some time to kind of get there. So kind of interesting. I mean, Amazon up 6.8%. Interesting name. It finished off its highs of the session. We know, again, the earnings, the cloud, AWS, also the retail side of the picture. But I know what you're saying, you know, that it didn't ultimately raise the whole group and keep it there in the trade. And it just speaks to some of the nervousness that is out there.
And it gets to the idea, too. I mean, Amazon, you kind of forget their weighting doesn't quite have the same impact as some of the others. And it kind of leaves what?
Amazon does, though, right? That's a pretty significant one on the S&P and the NASDAQ.
Yeah. I'm not saying it is, but I'm just saying, like, we talk about what's going to be the salvation. We've only got, 2 magnificent 7 names left. In fact, and when you look at the biggest weighted names, what is it? It's basically Apple next week and NVIDIA, and maybe like 2 or 3 weeks after that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, I just want to mention Dexcom, only because it's been on a tear. It keeps showing up and popping up in the top of the...
and not to belabor the point, but Amazon is down like 12% from its year-to-date high. Sorry to interrupt.
No. Yeah. What is it that you say, Tim?
You went in doubt, zoom out.
Okay. Yeah. I like to set him up for that. Hey, Dexcom, I just want to mention, because we keep talking... I like it.
I stole that from Katie Greifeld. I mean, I got to cite my sources
running for office, you know. Dexcom, though, again, another 10% move in the upside. This company coming out with their results. This has been under a lot of pressure. It was down 45% earlier over a period of time on concerns over all of those new kind of weight loss drugs and thinking that people didn't need these glucose monitors. Anyway, the company came out. It raised its revenue guidance for the full year, so it allayed some of those fears, and it also brought some of the other names in the group, Tandem Diabetes and Insulet, also were gaining in today's session.
We should note Eli Lilly reporting next week, and they're certainly working on their own version of a GLP-1, trying to get that approved for weight loss purposes. There were more than 400 stocks in the S&P 500 that were lower today. I had so many decliners to choose from. I do want to start with Chevron. Chevron falling the most since 2020 on disappointing profits, down 6.7% today. It missed third quarter expectations by 66 cents per share. This came after amid losses from overseas refining, rising costs at oil field project in Kazakhstan. We should note that ExxonMobil also reported lower than expected third quarter results, though it cited weak results in its chemical business for those results. Ford falling the most since 2011 at the close, the most in more than a year. Shares down more than 12% today. Missed third quarter earnings expectations. It cited higher costs, lower quality. We learned yesterday that it was pulling its forecast for adjusted EBITDA. This just after boosting it in July. We saw a similar move from GM earlier this week. The UAW work strike costing a lot of money for the company, $100 million in the third quarter for a total of $1.3 billion so far. We should note it did win labor peace through a tentative contract with the UAW. And then finally, I want to take a look at shares of JP Morgan. Shares down close to 4%, or should say it closed, down 3.6%, after investors learned that Jamie Dimon plans to sell shares that currently worth about $141 million, or now I guess $135 million after today's move.
That's good quick math.
Yeah, thank you. First such transaction since he took the helm of JP Morgan nearly 18 years ago, guys.
All right, let's check in on the yield space real quick here. You did see yields drop on the short end and the middle of the curve here, the 2, the 5, the 10-year, all lower here on the day. And we should point out, across the entirety of the curve, we are lower on the week, so a bit of a respite from the sell-off that we have been seeing in the Treasury space. So we should point out here, you take a look at those 5s in front of those numbers here. 5 on the 30-year yield, of course, 5 on the 20 and 5 on the 2-year. The 10-year pulling back from that 5% level here, but of course, this has been the scary part, at least for a lot of investors who I guess are too young to remember the last time we were here and how they adjust to that environment.
Yeah, well, for all intents and purposes, the 10-year did get to 5%. It got there earlier this week. It's retreated a little bit. One thing that we should mention, and we do so every Friday, is that investors might be a little bit weary of being too long heading into the weekend, given that Israeli forces are expanding their activity in the Gaza Strip. We don't know what's going to happen over the weekend. Oil prices are higher. Gold prices also higher, moving above that $2,000 an ounce mark.
Yeah, those are some interesting trading moves, and certainly in reaction to that concerns in the Middle East. All right, guys, that's a wrap. We've got a big week coming up, but you all have a good and safe safe weekend, and we will see you, of course, on Monday. All right, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform, radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. We will see you next week. Take a little bit of a break. Two stories we talked about a little bit earlier, actually, with Romaine and Katie. A little bit lighter fare, as we like to say. The tale of the two billionaires, both known by their first names, and Taylor Swift. First to Jamie Dimon, worth some $2 billion, and making a move that actually moves shares of JPM lower in today's trade. Jamie planning to do a little bit of selling of JPM shares, Tim?
Yeah, as I mentioned just moments ago, it's the first time he's actually sold stock since he took the helm at the bank almost 18 years ago. With more, we have Bloomberg News finance reporter Hannah Levitt here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. I was really surprised to learn, I will admit, I didn't know that he had never sold a share of stock, Anna.
Yeah, right, until, I guess, next year. He still hasn't. But, yeah, he's selling about, it's 12-ish%.
So it starts next year that he's doing it?
Yeah, so what was announced today was the plan to do it across, it'll be a planned thing over the course of next year.
Which is normal for executives to do. It's just oftentimes you have executives who, recently became heads of publicly traded companies are starting to sell shares, months after joining. So it's pretty interesting.
First time, and he'll still have, as of today's closing price, he'll still have more than $1 billion worth of stock in JP Morgan even after this share sale. So
Jamie, it's your financial advisor saying, hey, diversification. No, but what's really interesting is that 18-year tenure, he is, I think, safe to say, in terms of names on Wall Street, when he says something, we all kind of sit up and take notice. And so for it to be the first time he's doing it, I was kidding, and we were talking like he's the ultimate insider. The first thing that popped to everybody's mind is like, oh my God, is he thinking about retirement?
Yeah. What I'm hearing from my sources is that this has nothing to do with succession. I'll note that he, in 2021, got this special bonus to stick around. At the time, it was a significant number of years. He has his 5 more years joke. That was 5 more years becoming serious. But that expires or ends, or he gets that award in 2026. But that's not even him saying that, oh yeah, I'm going to step down in 2026. I think succession is on the mind across Wall Street, given what we've seen on Morgan Stanley this week. But, I'm not, just based on looking at this and what I'm hearing from sources, reading into this in a succession way, if that makes sense.
What about reading into it in a way that, maybe he doesn't see the future being as bright in a high interest rate environment for JP Morgan?
They've had record NII for the past few quarters. They're the only of the big six banks. Yeah, net interest income, and which is a major source of revenue for them and for the banks. And JPM is the only one of the big 6 banks that's actually up year to date stock wise. And he, when all is said and done, will still have, let's say shares stay around where they are today, he'll still have over $1 billion in the company.
All right, last question. If you were sitting down with Jamie Dimon, like maybe off mic, what would you ask him?
That's a great question. I think I'd ask him where he's traveling to next, because he's always on the road.
Oh, that's interesting. You wouldn't ask him about the selling?
No.
It's like an icebreaker question, Carol.
Yeah.
It's your first interview, Carol? Come on.
I know.
I guess where are you traveling? And then it's like
at the rodeo.
Then exactly. And then it's like, okay, are you going to retire in the next 5 years? That's the second question.
You're like, come on. We know, right? We know what he's going to do. Anyway, it's fascinating. We did see JP Morgan shares trade on this. Hannah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bloomberg News finance reporter Hannah Levitt joining us with JP Morgan. All right, so that's the 2 billionaire. He's worth $2 billion. Let's get to the other billionaire, a newly minted, and we're, of course, we've all been talking about it all day, Taylor Swift.
The biggest part of her earnings is undoubtedly her concert revenue.
Taylor Swift's concerts have generated at least $1.6 billion, and that is only ticket sales. That's not including merchandise.
She's done 6 tours over the years since 2009. Most recently, the Eras Tour became right as everyone was starved for live events. People were coming out of the pandemic and really wanted a chance to gather in person and celebrate.
And there are people that are willing to spend anything and everything to get a chance to see her.
One of those voices you heard, not the last one, because that was Romaine, is our next guest, Bloomberg News wealth reporter Devin Pendleton. She's right here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Carol, we are living in Taylor Swift's world. There is no question. And Bloomberg News this week I won't say minting her among the most recent new self-made billionaires.
No.
Because she did it herself.
Yep.
But the analysis came from our fantastic wealth team here at Bloomberg News, who crunched the numbers and found just how much that real estate in that catalog is worth.
Yeah, pulling out the calculators, doing the additions.
Oh, and the concert, the tour as well.
Let's get more on this billionaire's tale. That is Taylor Swift. Bloomberg News wealth reporter Devin Pendleton, who you heard a little bit of, is right now in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Kind of love this. We're all obsessed. I love that you guys actually broke it out and did the math. Tell us a little bit about this this mission here.
A really fun mission, I should say, off the bat. It's great to be kind of like right in the moment, this huge cultural moment we're having. And it was also remarkable when we started out. We didn't assume she was going to be a billionaire because it's a really hard milestone for a musician to achieve based on music. I mean, unless you form a lingerie line or a liquor deal.
Maybe a set of headphones and sell them to Apple for a lot of money.
Yeah, just say. It's really hard to become a billionaire. So the fact that she's done it through music, so through earnings from her streaming, through earnings from record sales, and of course concerts is the biggies, the ticket sales and merchandise sales. And then this movie, which is, we didn't even factor in the movie in our calculation.
Okay, why not?
Recently we didn't. So
how much does she get from that? Do we know?
It's probably around like the 40%, we're guessing.
Of every ticket sold, do you think goes to Taylor?
Roughly, probably
Top
around
line?
there. Well, 20%. So we're
Okay.
if you factor out, she funded it herself. So if you set that aside, that money is sunk cost. It's going to be because she skipped the movie studios. She didn't partner with them.
She didn't, did
No,
she?
she just partnered directly with AMC. So it was. I mean,
She's kind of like Bitcoin, you know? She just cuts out all the middle guys, or how Bitcoin's supposed to be.
But Bitcoin, but keeps going up.
Yeah, exactly.
That everybody loves. It's not controversial at all.
That is true. Hey, I love what you guys did with this piece. I really recommend anyone who hasn't seen it yet, check it out on the Bloomberg Terminal, check it out online, because the graphics are amazing. The friendship bracelets are a huge part of this. The beads are a huge part of this. I want to talk about the concerts and the ticket sales, because that is $370 million is the number that Bloomberg is putting on her sales and merchandise. So take us through the typical concert and how much money she gets in ticket sales.
Yeah, so the typical concert, we, after speaking with a lot of sources, we're roughly thinking she's grossing $2 million per show just from ticket sales. And then merch on top of that, I mean, that's another probably close to, I think it was around $500,000 on top of that. And then you have to factor in, of course, she's got a lot of expenses. Touring, this is very elaborate shows, the staging, there's pyrotechnics. So take all of that out, and we're estimating she gets roughly 35% of the gross ticket sales.
Is that typical?
That's typical, and honestly, that's very conservative. Because
okay.
Very conservative. We didn't want to make any estimates, beyond that, but especially after this Eras tour, she's going to kind of be able to probably name her price. And really have a lot of leverage with the venue owners. So Jimmy Buffett famously, he was able to gross 105% of ticket sales because...
Excuse me? 105?
105.
I'm sorry. I'm not very good at math, but I thought 100% was the max.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's crazy. They basically would pay him because they knew that these parrot heads would show up and they would spend so much on booze.
I had this math teacher in high school who would get so angry with us whenever we said anything more than 100%.
Because they're like,
there's no such thing as more than 100%.
Listen,
but hey, for Jimmy Buffett, there is.
Well, it's pretty remarkable. Lastly, there's Taylor's versions, right? Redoing the music, and then there's. I love that you guys threw in real estate because I've seen some of her homes. Like it's pretty remarkable. But just quickly, we've got about 30 seconds, 35 seconds.
Sure. So she has like a beautiful selection of property, also in sort of off the beaten path places like Newport, Rhode Island. Really unusual and diversified. I should point out both coasts, unusual areas, and then also her catalog, which is her music herself. She is re-recording so that she can really own the masters in perpetuity, which basically means she'll be getting this juicy dividend for years to come.
No Kansas City property yet? Do we know?
Okay. She does tend to buy property when she dates somebody. She tends to pick up property.
Yeah, so she probably has some London places we don't know about.
Okay.
Kansas City's on the horizon.
She did it right in Massachusetts when she did when she was dating a Kennedy. Just gonna say. All right.
Carol, you should have been involved in this piece. So much about Taylor Swift.
It's like Bloomberg, the People magazine version. This is so much fun. Devin, this is such great stuff. So appreciate getting to talk with you. Devin Pendleton, she's Bloomberg News wealth reporter. Check it out on the terminal. It's cool.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Signs of progress in the auto strike. Sources tell Bloomberg GM and Stellantis have each agreed to provide 25% wage increases to UAW members in their ongoing contract talks, matching the same offer made by Ford to end the 6-week strike. Automakers lower today. General Motors was down 4.6%. Stellantis lower by 2.4%. Ford, after earnings, plunged 12.3%. A down day for the Dow and the S&P. NASDAQ and the NASDAQ 100 index both advanced. The S&P extended the slide from its July peak to 10%, entering a correction. Oil topped $85 a barrel. Gold traded above $2,000 amid the latest geopolitical developments. So today we did have the S&P 500 index down for a second week, falling 19 points today, down 0.5%. The Dow down 366 points, a decline of 1.1%. The NASDAQ Composite Index was up 47 points, higher by 0.4%. 10-year yield 4.83%, with a 2-year yielding 5.00%. Spot gold up $21 the ounce at $2,006, up 1.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.3%, $85.09 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Well, a lot going on in the world of crypto this week. Sam Bankman-Fried testifying at his own fraud trial. He says a lot of people got hurt over FTX, said that he's not entirely sure about the FTX Alameda fund flows. Alameda, of course, is the hedge fund. And then there's also the actual crypto market, Carol. Bitcoin enjoying a solid week, up roughly 12%. And you got to kind of throw that number out there with
60,000. Anyone? Oops,
yeah.
that was that was the past.
You got to throw that number out there with the understanding that it trades 24/7. So if you say that number, you got to always be looking at it. It's all happening amid hopes of fresh demand from the possible approval in coming weeks of the first U.S. ETF investing directly in Bitcoin.
Got to tell you, we got a live blog that's tracking the testimony and what's going on in the courthouse today. Let's get to it, though. We've got our weekly check on the world of crypto. We have with us Terrence Yang, Managing Director of FinTech, Law Tech, Privacy at Swan Bitcoin. It's a platform that allows people to buy Bitcoin, including in IRAs, and he is joining us on Zoom from Los Angeles, California. Terrence, nice to have you here with us. I feel like the world of crypto is focused, and maybe rightfully so, on what's going on with SBF and FTX. What about the trial and the testimony are you watching very closely? And maybe what it means potentially for the crypto world going forward?
I am watching closely. Great to see you again, Carol.
Hi.
And hi, Tim. Bottom line, I think a couple things. Defense finally present their case. When they do the cross-examinations, right, it's usually to create doubt about the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses. It is not to present their case, and now they're doing that. I think Sam got very lucky, and the defense counsel got very lucky to have sort of this mock trial proffer yesterday with a judge, and now Sam seems to be doing a better job. He has a tendency to meander, but he's getting the point across.
Do you know him, Terrence? You're using his first name, whereas a lot of people, use his initials. Do you know Sam Bankman-Fried?
No, I do not.
How are you following the trial?
Yeah. I follow through X. They have a lot of good information, but also Bloomberg.com and some other sites.
I agree about Bloomberg.com. There's some great stuff there. Our live blog is really, really good. No, I'm just curious because it's, we're not getting, we have to rely on, reporting from there, whereas in so many other instances, we can actually watch live feeds from what's going on in the courtroom. And, we rely on court sketches and impressions, Carol, from our reporters who are there. So it's, it's a different experience, I think, for people who are observing. Yeah. You don't necessarily see the way he's feeling, at least according to our own interpretations. So talk more about what you're seeing and what you're reading from the trial, Terrence.
Yeah, sure. So based on what I'm reading and seeing, the defense is presenting a case. Sam's presenting a case that Caroline is basically the one to blame, did not hedge, he had doubts about her abilities, right? And was thinking of shutting down Alameda and other things. So you just need really one juror to get a hung jury, one juror who thinks there's reasonable doubt, does not cave. So someone who's a little bit strong-minded, because it would be 11-1, but that can happen. And then on retrial, what might happen with the BlackRock and Fidelity ETFs happening, arguably we're in a bull market, FTX with John Ray, who's excellent, in my opinion, at this sort of thing, clawing back assets, maybe doing a turnaround and so forth. You could have a situation where maybe people don't care as much because, for example, the investment in Anthropic and other things mean that everybody gets paid, or at least the FTX investors get paid whole, 100 cents on the dollar. That's possible by the time they retry. And so that might be how he gets off. I could see it as kind of a two-step process just because there's so much evidence against him.
Terrence, what's productive, though, for the crypto industry here in terms of the outcome of this trial specifically?
So I part ways with my crypto friends, some of whom I'm friends with in real life even today, but I am Bitcoin only, and I think that there needs to be, and there will be, massive cleanup in crypto. You see that with Senator Lummis and others kind of asking the government the DOJ to decide kind of get off the block or not, and just issue indictments or make a decision on CZ and Binance, but also Tether. I think Tether's okay, but I don't want to get into that. I think the main point is we have massive tailwinds for Bitcoin because of BlackRock, Fidelity, and two other $1 trillion plus asset managers all applying for a spot Bitcoin ETF. And that looks like it's going well. On the other hand, you have crypto, which has destroyed many Americans, especially poor and middle class, of their life savings through these pump and dumps, these digital penny stocks that these casinos are underregulated casinos are basically shilling on the American public. And that does not look so good. I think that's less promising because of all the securities violations and allegedly crimes committed by SBF. Potentially CZ and Binance, we'll see if they actually die.
Are you worried about the implications of people changing the way they're thinking about crypto because of SBF and other people who are in the crosshairs of law enforcement, Terrence? There people are saying, okay, I'm just going to throw in the towel because, well, look at the performance. And two, look at the people who we thought were reputable. I mean, they named stadiums and had Super Bowl ads.
I am not. The reason is because I'm a long-term believer in Bitcoin. I think 5, 10 decades out, Bitcoin should be very valuable. There are other threats to it with FinCEN and other things that the government's doing. That's not good. It's underreported for now. I'm sure Bloomberg will fix that and others. But bottom line, I'm not worried because, look, there's been a mess. That was a massive bubble in 2021 in crypto and Bitcoin, and the fallout from the bear market and the destruction, and there needs to be a cleanup. I think it's really naive to think that, this is bad for Bitcoin because Bitcoin has enduring value. So, and it doesn't have a CEO. It's not a security.
Hey, Terrence, forgive me for jumping in. We've just got a couple of minutes left here, but I'm thinking, there might be people listening or watching our broadcast right now, listening to you and say, yeah, I get it, that there needs to be a cleaning out. That makes sense, right? We certainly saw that in the internet, in .com bust, right? There were some things that really made sense, and there were a lot of things that didn't. Having said that, you're at Swan Bitcoin, and you're, of course, going to say Bitcoin is the one to follow and that has legs here. So what would you say to somebody like that you're basically, forgive me, for lack of better words, talking your book?
No, I am talking my book. I think you do want people to talk their book and reveal it and explain it. I used to be in crypto. I was retired when Corey Clipston, our wonderful founder and CEO, pulled me, made me a job offer to come out of retirement. So a lot
You
of
retired?
us...
You're too young to retire.
I was overpaid on Wall Street. I'm older than I look. and I was overpaid on Wall Street, and I was living frugally, taking care of my aging parents. But anyway, so bottom line, I would say at Swan, we have people on a mission to help other people get Bitcoin before Wall Street and governments buy all the Bitcoin. If we're right, and I think we are, that this is the ultimate hard money asset for the future because it's digital, it's bearer, it's very hard to stop, it's very hard to confiscate and take away, and incredibly finite at only 21 million Bitcoin. So in my view, it's okay to be have a view, but you have to reveal why, and you have to justify, like defend your position.
Right. Transparency is going to be crucial, but I still try to get my head around this idea of, you know, the purity of what Bitcoin and maybe blockchain are supposed to be, you know, but then are you opening up doors to a lack of oversight and then problems? So then how do you balance that with some kind of oversight that really makes it safe and secure? But that's going to be something we have to hold for next time and a future conversation because we do have to run. Terrence, thanks for spending time with us. Terrence Yang, Managing Director of FinTech, Law Tech, Privacy over at Swan Bitcoin, as we said, a platform that allows people to buy Bitcoin, including in their IRAs, which would really open it up to a lot of people.
We got to get Corey back on the show, too. He's always a fun interview as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Really appreciate Terrence Yang taking the time to join us. Hey, let's get to Washington, D.C. now for a check on the latest world and national news. We got Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Tim. The manhunt continues for Robert Card, the 40-year-old suspect in that mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine. Mike Sawchuk is commissioner of Maine Public Safety. He says authorities have received tips that they're sorting through.
Our officers, our investigators, and that's investigating. When I say our, I'm talking about local, county, state, federal, all of our partners, been continuing to work 530 plus tips and leads that have come in from the general public. From a number of communities, a number of different relationships.
Mike Sawchuk says divers are searching the water near a boat launch where the suspect's car was found. Also, the medical examiner has identified all 18 victims, ranging in ages from 14 to 76. The UN General Assembly is calling for a humanitarian truce in Gaza. The resolution was drafted by the UN's 22-nation Arab group. It comes as Israeli defense officials say they're expanding activity in Gaza. Bloomberg spoke with Alon Pincus, the former Israel consul general. He says Israel may be planning a major ground war or a search and destroy operation.
Smaller forces making pinpoint incursions into a given area, searching, destroying Hamas, and then leaving swiftly.
Again, that's former Israel Consul General Alon Pincus. President Biden may be touting his economic agenda, but a Bloomberg Morning Consult poll finds swing state voters believe the economy is heading in the wrong direction. 39% of respondents said the economy was their key concern, followed by 9% who say they're more concerned about immigration. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
Profits. Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. Turned out to be a mixed Friday, losing week 2 in a row for the S&P 500 index. The S&P did extend its slide from its July peak to 10%, entering a correction. Oil topped $85 a barrel today. Gold hit $2,000 amid the latest geopolitical developments. S&P 500 index lower today by 19 points, ending the week, heading into the weekend at 4117, drop there of 0.5%. Dow Industrials down 366 points, a decline of 1.1%. The Nasdaq Composite Index was up 47, higher by 0.4%, helping out Nasdaq and the Nasdaq 100 Index. Amazon up 6.8%. Intel shares today also advanced after earnings, up by 9.3%. Well, as for the overall market backdrop and the economy, Eric Clark is portfolio manager at Rational Dynamic Brands Fund, and he was a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I'm just saying that, as long as people have jobs, then even if we moan and groan about things, listen to what we do, not as much as what we say, because the retail sales numbers have been super strong, and yet the narrative is that the consumer's tapped out and very, kind of dire.
And you can hear more of that conversation on the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. ExxonMobil sees tight global oil supplies, putting upward pressure on energy prices for at least the next few years, as the world continues to suffer from a lack of investment in fossil fuels. Also reporting earnings this morning, we heard from Chevron. Chevron fell short of analyst expectations amid weak returns from its overseas refineries. Again, shares of Chevron declined 6.7%. ExxonMobil was down 1.9%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic live here at Bloomberg headquarters. Do want to mention a headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Wells Fargo today announcing that its vice chairman, Thomas Nides, has decided to leave the company to return his attention to events in the Middle East. He joined the company in September after retiring in July as U.S. ambassador to Israel. It's a post he had held since 2021, just crossing the Bloomberg. And lucky for us, in our studio is none other than our own Max Abelson. He's finance reporter for Bloomberg News. We've got lots to talk about with Max, but first up, Max, that news, interesting, not a surprise?
Oh, a huge surprise for me.
A huge surprise.
But I'm just being honest, though. I mean, it maybe not a surprise in the sense that Tom Nides is both a really powerful and well-connected Wall Street executive and like a major figure in the U.S. government, and was literally, I think, our ambassador to Israel for a long time until essentially just the other day. So the fact that he's leaving to go deal with the Middle East is itself not a shock. But on the other hand,
he just joined.
He had just joined. You don't usually see people stepping down after just a few days. But he said in a press release that he's been watching these horrific events unfold in Gaza and in Israel, and that he said it had a profound effect on him. So apparently it's like a not a governmental role. I think he's doing it through the UJA Federation.
Right.
But yeah, Charlie Scharf, the head of Wells Fargo, must not be thrilled. Although he says in the press release though that he supports it.
And Wells Fargo saying that William Daley is returning to the vice chairman role. So
Bill Daley, and I just to be clear to your listeners, I mean, what we're talking about here when we talk about Bill Daley and Tom Nides is that kind of like the apex of people who are really, really connected to kind of democratic power politics, friends with the Clintons and Obamas, and are trusted and appointed to powerful roles, and also really, really connected to Wall Street. These two are, Daley and Nides, are really, very few people can match them when it comes to really understanding Wall Street and really understanding Washington. I mean, the cynical way of describing it is the revolving door, because they tend to go from one to the other.
Well, certainly respect his decision and wish him well and safety in his work there.
How lucky are we to have Max Abelson? Not even to talk about that. Like, Max was just sitting here in the news cross.
Today and always. All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit. No easy segue, but we do want to remind everybody that dropping last night, the latest episode of the Business Week show, which is hosted by none other than Max Abelson, Business Week contributor, and as we said, finance reporter for Bloomberg News. In this latest episode, he sits down with Chip Wilson, the founder and former CEO of Lululemon. They talk about a lot of things, including the role that moonshots have played in his career and some of his latest challenges. It's a personal one, and Max, as you know, is here in studio. It is a personal one, is it not?
It really is. Thanks so much for having me. I love doing this show, and then I love coming on to talk to you too about it. We had in our episode 1, it was genius. Episode 2, risk, and I feel like if you put risk and genius together, you sort of maybe get a concept of moonshots, which is like doing something that's very, very, very hard and very, very unlikely, but that the payoff is huge. And Chip Wilson is doing one kind of moonshot right now, which is that he's spending $100 million of his own money to try to cure a very rare form of, I think it's muscular dystrophy that he has. And, you know, I just want to give a quick shout out. It's not me, but Ari Alstetter, a Business Week writer, or a writer at Bloomberg News, wrote a Business Week story about Chip Wilson, separate from my interview, that is so good, and I highly recommend our listeners go check it out. It does something that I really admire, which is it sort of asks this question of, you know, what does it mean when very, very wealthy people get to spend a huge amount of money kind of helping to decide what diseases get a cure? That is not the kind of moral center of my interview. What I talked to Chip Wilson about, who founded Lululemon, is the sort of the extent to which his whole life and his whole way of seeing the world and his whole career has been based on like taking these huge kind of leaps. And Chip Wilson is a very unusual man. I've never quite interviewed someone who talks about the present sort of in terms of the future. And talks
What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, the real question is, what does he mean by that? He says that he has self-willed amnesia, Tim. He says that he can forget the past. He says that he thinks about the present in terms of the future, in terms of remaking the future. It's a kind of Ayn Randian way of seeing the world. It's like a very like sort of...
Reminds me of the tote bags that Lululemon sold. They had Ayn Rand quotes on them.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally, great call.
Well, something else interesting came up in your conversation. It had to do about an interview he had with the SEC. Here's a little bit from the latest episode of the Business Week show.
Yes, I can remember the last time I was dishonest, and it actually makes me quite sick. I was being interviewed by the SEC, and I think I had to say what wasn't true in order to, how can I say this? If I would have said what was true, then I would have spent 3 or 4 years in court, flying back and forth from Vancouver to who knows where in the United States. And I probably would have lost $1 billion in stock value. But more so, I just had 3 kids at a very young age, and I wasn't willing to be away from them. And that took more precedence over telling the truth.
That, of course, is the founder and former CEO of Lululemon, Chip Wilson, talking with Max Abelson. I just have to say, were you sitting there and was your reporter radar just like going like on fire?
Okay, so I'll tell you. So one floor up from where we're sitting right now in the Business Week Show studio, I think I said to him, like, I think we were quiet for a second, and I think I was like, Chip, like, do you wanna like elaborate? Do you wanna tell us what you're talking about here? And he was like, no. And then I think I said something along the lines of, well, I really want to know more. And he said, yeah, I bet you do. So what we did to be responsible, because we're responsible here, is we got in touch with him before the episode aired. And, we asked him one more time. Carol said, can you tell us anything more? And what happened was, I don't think I've ever seen this before in my career. His representatives wrote back to say that they were retracting and recanting his answer due to falsity, and they wouldn't specify. They wouldn't specify what was false. But I just want to say, like, in the context of this broader interview with Chip Wilson, one thing that I really enjoy about him...
just got about 30 seconds, kid.
One thing that I really enjoy about him is that he's just clearly himself. He clearly takes a roll of the dice, as to use one of his phrases, and he says things, and he certainly has gotten himself in trouble, including on Bloomberg airwaves previously. And I have to say, I kind of at least admire, generally speaking, when people at least kind of speak freely.
Especially CEOs and former CEOs.
In an era of so much being sanitized. sanitized, right? I feel like by
and these canned
their
answers
PR teams
over and
stuff.
over again.
So-
So many executives.
At least he's not sanitized, and I hope folks watch the interview.
New episodes of Business Week drop on Thursdays. Find it on Bloomberg and on Bloomberg Originals. Max Abelson, love you. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. ExxonMobil sees tight global oil supplies, putting upward pressure on energy prices for at least the next few years as the world continues to suffer from a lack of investment in fossil fuels. ExxonMobil CEO Darren Woods was interviewed on Bloomberg Radio earlier today. He talked about the industry rebound and also the outlook.
The industry is still recovering from the impact of the pandemic and the lower levels of capital that have been going in across the industry to offset the depletion that's been happening. And so supplies are fairly tight. So the big issue is, where is demand at? If you see real growth and growth in demand, then that's going to challenge the supply base that we have, which will put more pressure on prices and margins. So I think it's really a function of where does the global economies go in the years ahead.
And that was Darren Woods, the CEO of ExxonMobil. You can hear more of the conversation on the Talks podcast. ExxonMobil shares today dropped 1.9%. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy gave investors much of what they wanted this earnings season: robust sales and profit growth, along with a hint that the cloud division earnings machine is regaining momentum. Today we had Amazon shares advance by 6.8%. And Intel surged the most in nearly 3 years after predicting a return to sales growth in the fourth quarter, fueled by an improving PC market and a more competitive product line. Intel up 9.3%. Those are our top company stories at this hour, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. Tim Stenovec and Carol Masser. We're live in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio in New York.
A little bit of popcorn here.
Yeah, it's popcorn time, just before 5 o'clock. It's also news time.
It is.
We're going to go to Washington, D.C. to get a check on the latest world and national news. We've got Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom. Hey, Nancy.
Thanks, Tim. A shelter-in-place order still in place around Lewiston, Maine, as authorities continue to search for the suspect in that mass shooting Wednesday night that killed a teen and injured 13 others. Mike Sawchuk leads the Maine Department of Public Safety. He says they'll be searching a river near where the suspect's car was found.
You're going to see some air resources that will fly over this particular area, and they're looking to see what can we clear from the air. Do I have to put divers in that particular area, or can I tell from the top, based on the current and how muddy the water is and all those other things, can I see to the very bottom here?
Sawchuk says they're also doing ground searches and checking on more than 500 tips that have come in. All 18 victims have been identified by the local medical examiner. Sam Bankman-Fried, who founded cryptocurrency exchange FTX, testified today in his fraud trial. Bloomberg legal reporter Tony Ahrens is following the proceedings.
He was being contrite. He said he'd made mistakes, big and small. The biggest was not having a chief risk officer, which he admitted came back to haunt them all. But after that, he really talked about what he didn't do more than what he did do. He was painting himself as kind of an out-of-touch CEO.
Bloomberg's Tony Ahrens says Bankman-Fried testified he was concerning himself mostly with FTX and not with what else was happening. His testimony is expected to resume next week. In Donald Trump's civil fraud trial, the judge today ordered Trump's daughter Ivanka to testify. Her father is accused of inflating his assets by billions in financial documents provided to banks and insurers. Prosecutors want to ask Ivanka Trump about financial transactions that were carried out by the Trump Organization. She is no longer a defendant in the case, but the state says she does have personal knowledge of the facts relevant to the claims against the remaining defendants, including her father and her brothers, Don Jr. and Eric Trump. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nancy Lyons. Now back to you, Carol and Tim.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. Well, coming up tomorrow, Saturday, 8 a.m. Wall Street time, Bloomberg Business Week on the weekend on Bloomberg Radio. And one of the interviews that we caught up Tim with was none other than Ed Price.
Yeah, we spoke to him earlier this week. We spoke to him on Monday. You know Ed. He's a former British trade official, represented the UK government to Wall Street. He's also advised members of European and British parliaments, now serves as principal for geopolitical forecasting at the firm Ergo. It's a global intelligence consulting and forecasting firm. And a reminder, it correctly predicted, Carol, a Russian invasion back in early 2022.
Yeah, we leaned on him to take a look at the multiple troubled, geopolitically sensitive spots facing our world and how it all could play out in a really scary way. Listen up, everybody.
I'm very concerned. And, you have to be careful with these things because, like I said in these articles, if you're someone who worries, then you're going to get accused of crying wolf, and rightly so, if things don't go the way that they might be going. But let's play it out quickly. Israel goes into Gaza, Hezbollah thrusts into the north. There's a second, third, fourth, sixth, whatever intifada it is in the West Bank. At the same time, Iran decides now's a good time for some sort of global activation of any terror networks they have. Bob's your uncle, right? Immediately, you've got to get the only real cop in town, the only real cop in the world, which is the United States, involved somehow in the Middle East. Now, again, if I was an adversary of the United States, I'd be thinking, well, all I need to do is a third one someplace, and, I can go and take Taiwan.
All right, that, of course, is Ed Price. He is principal for geopolitical forecasting over at Ergo, as we said, the global intelligence consulting and forecasting firm. Check out our weekend BW broadcast, 8 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. Also, our